Hello and welcome to the ScatterVolt channel, and today let's find out what the best $400 graphics card is. On my right, I have the RTX 3060, which has an MSRP of $330, but still retails for about $430 at the lowest. And then on the left, I have the brand new Radeon RX 6650 XT, which has an MSRP of $400, but retails for $380 right now. Both of these cards are fantastic for 1080p and 1440p gaming. However, if you clicked on this video, then you might have a little bit of difficulty between choosing one of these graphics cards, and if so, you've come to the right place. Fortunately, I've done all of the hard work for you in dissecting every part of these graphics cards, including their gaming performance, content creation abilities, streaming performance, value, and other gaming features. And throughout all of my work, I have found out that one of these cards is a decisive winner over the other, and I'm going to tell you which one it is at the end of this video. So if you enjoy value-focused PC gaming, then do consider subscribing to the ScatterVolt channel. I recommend it, not forcing you to, but it's a nice thing. But I would recommend is liking this video though, so we can get it in the algorithm and get some exposure, because it's low-key rough out there. So let's start with the RTX 3060 and what you get. So if you don't know by now already, it comes with 12 gigabytes of VRAM, a 1852 megahertz boost clock speed, 28 ray tracing cores, 3584 CUDA cores, and a 170 watt TDP. Then with the new Radeon RX 6650 XT, it has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM, a 2694 megahertz boost clock speed, 32 ray tracing cores, 2048 stream processors, and a 175 watt TDP. So with those overviews out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get right into the performance metrics between these two cards and a whole slew of other features right before we talk about our sponsor, VIP SAD Key. If you're looking to activate Windows 10 Home, Pro, or 11 on a brand new or existing gaming PC, look no farther than VIP SAD Key. They're the site that I went to activate the Windows 11 installation that I had on my $700 gaming PC build guide that I produced recently, and it only costed me $23 to purchase one of their keys, including my discount code VIP Scatter, and that was all activated on that PC within a matter of like about 2 minutes, so not that long. So if you want to check them out, I'll have a link to their website and my discount code at the top of the description. Alright, so both of these cards are running on my Ryzen 5 5600X Testbench with 16 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz RAM. Nope, 3600 megahertz RAM. My bad. Going a little quick. But one thing to note is that all these results have resizable bar turned off, because we'll be touching on that later. So starting with Apex Legends at its maxed out graphical settings, at 1080p, the RX 6650 XT does have a sizable lead over the 3060 by about 25 frames per second on average. And at 1440p, that lead goes down to about 9, but still a pretty healthy amount over the 3060 at least 1080p and 1440p. Then on Forza Horizon 5, the 6650 XT does have a lead at 1080p by almost 10 frames per second on average, but at 1440p, these cards are nearly identical, with the 1% low on the 3060 just being a little bit better than the 6650 XT. Then going on to Fortnite with just the DX12 API, the 6650 XT just slightly edges out ahead at 1080p, and at 1440p, both of these cards are basically neck and neck. However, I did want to make a note on Fortnite performance mode, since I know some of you guys use that API just to get the maximum frames per seconds possible. And on that, here the 3060 does a much better job utilizing that performance mode API to really spool up the frames per seconds to go above 300 at both 1080p and 1440p, with higher textures and meshes applied to everything else. Now let's kick off our Cyberpunk 2077 results with just a regular ultra settings benchmark, where the 6650 XT does have a lead at 1080p by about 4 frames per second on average, and at 1440p, once again, these cards are pretty much in a deadlock. However, if we turn on ray tracing with no DLSS for the RTX 3060 or FSR for the 6650 XT applied, as you can see, the 3060 does a much better job handling that ray tracing with Cyberpunk than the 6650 XT. And it doesn't get much better for the 6650 XT if we move on to turning on FSR 1.0 for the 6650 XT, because it's still lagging behind the 3060. Then moving on to Red Dead Redemption 2 at the preferred quality settings at 1080p and 1440p, the 6650 XT just edges out ahead again of the 3060 at both resolutions. Then moving on to a 5-game average, if you just take the normal APIs of all the games we've tested so far, with no ray tracing, DLSS, or FSR applied, the 6650 XT is the faster card at 1080p while costing less, and the 6650 XT is pretty much on par with the 3060 at 1440p while yet again costing less. So at the moment, just stock with these cards as is, the 6650 XT is the faster card at 1080p, while the 3060 is a little bit slower at 1080p, but is equivalent in terms of performance at 1440p. And as you already saw, when it comes to ray tracing, obviously the 3060 does do a better job then. However, I wanted to make a section on resizable bar, because with the 6650 XT, it does have the unique opportunity to take advantage of AMD Smart Access Memory. Now, if you don't know what AMD Smart Access Memory is, well, really it's just a marketing term for resizable bar for AMD Ryzen CPUs and Radeon RX 6000 GPUs. But to give you the gist of it in a short amount of time, resizable bar makes the entirety of the graphics frame buffer accessible to the processor at once, and therefore, if textures, shaders, and geometry are loading in faster, then the gaming performance should increase along with it, since we'll have it all in one go right off the bat. And so far, tech reviewers have seen some positive uplifts with enabling resizable bar, not just on Radeon GPUs, but also with Nvidia GPUs, and again, not just on Ryzen AMD CPUs, but also on Intel CPUs. You can enable resizable bar on any combination of CPU and GPU in the BIOS and potentially get more gaming performance. So I wanted to go ahead and show you 3 more games with resizable bar enabled on the 3060 and 6650 XT, and just show you what happens. Starting with Forza Horizon 5 with resizable bar enabled on both of these graphics cards, or in this case, Smart Access Memory for the 6650 XT. Here, the 6650 XT has a huge increase in performance over the 3060 at both resolutions, getting about 30 frames per second more on average at 1080p over the stock 6650 XT results, and almost above 20 frames per second boost at 1440p over the original 6650 XT result. Whereas with the 3060 though, the results didn't really change much, unfortunately. So this is one very big victory for the 6650 XT, and that leads us to the next one. Now moving on to Fortnite with resizable bar enabled, the 6650 XT does gain about 5 frames per second on average at 1080p with Smart Access Memory enabled, and at 1440p it's just about 3 frames per second more, which that isn't as big of an increase versus what we just saw with Forza Horizon 5, but it's an increase nonetheless, as from the 3060 results, we actually went down in performance when resizable bar was enabled on the 3060. And then lastly, I wanted to close out with Red Dead Redemption 2 with resizable bar enabled. And once again, it's a similar trend to Fortnite. The 6650 XT does show increases in performance across both resolutions, whereas the 3060 more or less just stays the same, other than an increase in the 1% low at 1440p. So now if we take that same 5-game average that I showed you before, but factor in the resizable bar results, here, the 6650 XT is the clear winner at 1080p, while again costing less, and at 1440p, now it's a bit more clear cut that with resizable bar enabled, it is the faster card at 1440p while costing less. And all of this leads us into our next section, which is the value of both of these graphics cards. And as you've seen already, the 6650 XT is a cheaper graphics card by about $50. And if we take those 5-game average results, here at the dollar per frames per second chart, we can see that the 6650 XT once again is the more valuable card on paper, and it becomes even more valuable if you enable resizable bar with our resizable bar results. And more or less the point I want to hit is that while the 6650 XT is the faster card on paper with at least resizable bar, and even without it, it was the slightly faster card at 1080p, and equivalent in terms of performance with the 3060 at 1440p. This costs $50 less at most. So that $50 you save could be used on a faster gaming processor, like say upgrading from an i3-12100F to an i5-12400F, or moving from like a 512GB M.2 SSD to a 1TB M.2 SSD and doubling your storage, while again, either not losing performance or, like we saw, gaining performance. So in terms of value, the 6650 XT is the clear winner at both resolutions, but there are other features we need to discuss when comparing these two graphics cards. One of those, of course, being DLSS on the RTX 3060. Now, for the longest time, and still is, DLSS is one of the main selling points for RTX 3000 cards, as it's a way to upscale the graphical fidelity of your games while not losing frame rate, or vice versa. It can increase your frame rate while not reducing the graphical fidelity. And it's been doing awesome for the RTX 3000 cards. However, that has all changed a bit recently with the introduction of FSR 2.0 from AMD. So far from what we've seen from tech reviewers comparing FSR 2.0 and DLSS, both of these upscaling algorithms visually don't look that different, if not at all in certain scenarios, which is positive because FSR 2.0 doesn't require any deep learning algorithms to increase the upscaling and frame rates. It just uses Lanczos, I think that's how you pronounce it, Lanczos upscaling, which means it doesn't require any AI to increase the frame rate because it's just a regular upscaling algorithm, which means it can be used on not just RX 6000 cards, but also on RTX cards and old GTX cards and even old RX and Radeon cards. Pretty much any graphics card can use FSR 2.0, which is a positive for PC gaming as a whole. So as far as its future implementation, it could rival that right now of DLSS 2.0 while offering the same increases in frame rate and quality, while again, not being limited to just one platform. So in my opinion, the appeal of getting an RTX 3000 card just for DLSS isn't as strong as it was until FSR got announced a few months ago. So that is one thing that kind of dims the 3060 a little bit in my opinion, given its price increase over the 6650 XT. But on that note, what about ray tracing? Because as we saw, the 3060 clearly handled ray tracing a lot better than the 6650 XT. While that is true, in my opinion, I wouldn't get an RTX 3060 for strictly ray tracing purposes because it's just not that fast enough. Even running at ray tracing ultra settings, the 3060 couldn't manage 60 frames per second on average at 1080p, and it was well behind at 1440p. In my opinion, I would probably shoot for a 3070 at minimum to run ray tracing games at a high enough frame rate while still looking good to say that you have ray tracing enabled, but ultimately you're going to want a 3080 or 3090. But now how about streaming performance? Because the 3060 does have the NVENC encoder, and that is very much true. It is one of the best hardware-based encoders on the market to transcode your streams on the Twitch, YouTube, and whatever else. However, that quality and FPS gap has been going down thanks to VCE on the AMD graphics cards for its own built-in hardware encoder. Right now, if you were to put an NVENC and VEC stream right next to each other, you couldn't really make out that much of a graphical difference between the two unless you really punched into the image, which you can't do on, say, your web browser when watching Twitch or even on your phone. So the gap between both of these graphics cards and their built-in decoders for streams has gone down, and I wouldn't really go as far as saying NVENC is totally worth picking up the 3060 over the 6650 XT as far as streaming purposes go. And either way, the $50 you save with the 6650 XT could be used on, say, getting a higher core count CPU, which would be useful in streaming because you could run more things in the background while not reducing the frame rate of the game you're wanting to stream. So that's one thing to keep in mind. However, the last thing I want to touch on, and is the one upside of the 3060 over the 6650 XT given its price increase, is the content creation opportunities. Now, I don't want to sound a gatekeeper here, but if you are a serious videographer, video editor, or any sort of special effects content creation specialist, the 3060 is actually a pretty neat card. Because for one, it has a lot of CUDA cores, which is supported amongst many applications dealing with content creation. but it also comes with 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and that is going to be so awesome for speeding up your renderers, since having more VRAM is one of the cheapest ways to basically speed up your render times amongst all applications. So having that in a $400 graphics card, say versus going up to like a 3080 12 gigabyte with another $500, that's a pretty sick deal. But I want to stress, I mean serious content creation, like what I'm doing right now. Filming with a 4K camera with H.265 compressed footage that I'm going to have to play back live in Premiere Pro, that I want to have also graded at the same time of doing live playback and rendering in like a really high bit rate, so it goes through YouTube's compression system. Or if you're a serious special effects artist, like some of my friends, that is where this 3060 is going to be very useful. If you're just rendering memes to post on your Discord, that doesn't count. If you're, or even I'm gonna go as far as saying if you are going to do any gameplay, recording, rendering to like a YouTube or Twitch channel, it's gameplay, it's not super compressed 4K footage. Both of these cards will handle just regular gameplay recordings totally fine in your preferred editing software. So with all of that said, there is one more thing I want to touch on before giving the final verdict, and that is discussing AMD graphics card driver issues, with heavy quotations right there. The idea that AMD graphics card drivers are bad and they really hurt the performance of your PC games is a misnomer. That's pretty much a meme, just because people really like Nvidia cards more so over AMD cards. And while yes, there have been instances in the past where certain AMD cards on release have had very buggy drivers, in the current modern day age, with the RX 6000 series cards being out for almost over a year and a half, there's no issues anymore. Anyways, I went ahead and polled you guys on my YouTube community tab and Twitter for my RX 6000 users and asked if you guys have experienced any widespread issues on these cards, and virtually not really is the answer amongst many of you guys. Both of these cards are going to basically run the same in terms of stability, and if you do run across any issues, that's going to come down to the game and not the graphics card. Alright, so that's been a lot of talking, and I appreciate all of you who have made it to this point in the video, but let's finally get to the verdict between both of these cards. And if you've probably guessed already, the 6650 XT is the clear-cut winner, basically across all of the categories except for one, and maybe two-ish. For content creation, and I mean serious content creation, like I was just saying in the content creation section, the 3060 is actually kind of a neat solution for any of that. But for anything else regarding straight up gaming performance, streaming performance, value, and even just light video editing for like a gameplay channel, the 6650 XT is more than capable and faster than the 3060 while costing less. Unless you're a Fortnite player. Then get the 3060, because it might run better, according to what people have said, and it also supports DLSS, which there's no FSR 2.0 on Fortnite, so there's more frames per second there to win your Battle Royale games. So that is it for this video, and I, again, appreciate you guys for making it to the end, and yeah, if you haven't subscribed yet, you should. You like what I make, and I appreciate you guys for enjoying what I make as well, both in the comments and in the like section. As robotic as that sounds, I do mean it. Thank you. And before making this video any longer, I'll go ahead and say thank you for watching. This is the ScatterVolt channel, signing out.